What's up, everybody? It's a DIY pool guy, and today we're going to talk about replacing a pool pump, or more specifically the motor on the pool pump. So this past weekend the pump went out, and today we're going to work on rebuilding that pump. Now, most folks, when the pump goes out, or at least when their service technician comes out, they'll tell them the pump's bad and replace the whole pump, and that's a $500 to $800 or more pump depending on what you've got. But in most instances, it's really just the motor that's out. So today we're going to talk about how to replace the motor on a pump. All right, so let's get started. All right, first things first, safety first. So here we've got the breaker turned off that feeds that pool pump. If you're not comfortable working with electricity, then you should consider calling a service professional for this. I've worked all throughout my life, even down as young as 5 and 6 years old, working with electricity, so I'm fairly comfortable with this, and this is well within my skill set. But if not for you, make sure you don't endeavor in something that might be beyond your skill that could be dangerous to you. But all right, assuming you're good to go, let's get started. Okay, our first activity is going to be to remove the pump. So here are the tools that we're going to need to get this pump removed from here. All right, nothing too difficult, but those big channel locks are awesome. Okay, here's our pump. It's the Jandy FloPro, pretty common pump out there. And you can see the motor coming off of the pump housing there. This is what we're going to replace today. You can see our electrical circuit running into the back of it. And our first step is to remove this screw that's in the back of the cover here. So with that, you'll need just a normal screwdriver or a hex driver, and we'll take that off and then go from there. Okay, inside the back of the motor housing, you'll see we have our 3 220 wires, a black, a red, and a green for ground. And then lastly is our bonding wire ground down here at the bottom. So we'll need to remove all of these. For me, I like to take the screw all the way out because ultimately we're gonna have to be putting them back in, and it's a little bit easier than having to rebend or be concerned about bending the wire around the post. If you take the screw all the way out, keep the U shape at the end of the wire. When you put the new pump in, you'll just drop it right back on top. So I'll go ahead and pop these out and use my hex driver and my needle nose if I need to help work those off of there. All right. Okay, we've got the screws out, the wires are free. We've taken the bonding wire off, as you can see here. And here's the trick. We're gonna have to take these wires out of here because we're gonna reuse this part. So all we wanna do is just take this nut off here. Let's see if I can do this one-handed. And then we're gonna have to work to get those wires out of there. So I'm gonna go ahead and turn the camera off and do this with 2 hands. And we'll be off to the races, all right? Okay, here's my first pro tip. This is the cover to the back of the motor. And just typically because you're working around the pool, you've got a lot of pine bark and stuff, and one lost screw and it just turns a 15-minute project into a 30-minute project, so you gotta run to the store. So I like to put my my screws right in there and make sure that that stays out of the way. All right, next thing we're gonna do is now we've got to disassemble the pump or disconnect the pump from the plumbing system. So we've got 2 large nuts, one here on the discharge and one here on the intake. I've got my extra large channel lock pliers. These are a great tool, and if you're going to be doing work with the pumps, it's worth the investment. You know, it's just good for snugging it up and good for taking it off. So we're just going to go ahead and get that on there and take that off, and we'll then head out to the shop to do the motor replacement. Okay, I've got the pump removed, as you can see, and one thing for you to keep track of, as you can see here, or maybe it'd be tough to see, but on this flange here, there's going to be an O-ring here, and this, of course, is going to keep the water from seeping out in this connection. So you want to keep track of it. Here's what it is, it's a real thin one. As a general rule of thumb, when you replace the pumps, good idea to replace all the O-rings. It's just no time like the present. It's real easy to get to. A couple extra bucks on the parts, but definitely worth it to ensure that you're not going to have a leak when you get it all put together. So there's going to be one up in here and one over there. So more importantly, keep track of them. If you don't plan to replace them, make sure when you disconnect the pump that it's actually in there and seated. Sometimes you might consider taking it out, cleaning it off, put some lubrication on it, and then putting it back in. But keep track of them. So I'm going to go ahead and put that right here inside my container, and now we'll head out to the shop. All right, we're out at the shop and time to get busy on the good stuff. First part of a successful DIY job is sourcing the right parts. I source my parts from a company called inyopools.com. That's INYOpools.com. And I'm not sponsored by them. They just happen to give me good customer service, so I'm a returning customer and thought I'd give them props. All right, main components we're going to replace, of course, is the motor, which you'll see right there. But then you'll want to go ahead, as we said, replace the O-ring. This is the housing O-ring, and there's a second one in there called the diffuser O-ring. And then the pump seal, which you'll see here. And you'll see this component here, the ceramic piece I'm keeping in the plastic. All the pros online say that you shouldn't touch that, get the oils from your finger on it. So as I do the replacement, I'll be sure to have gloves. All right, when it comes to specking the motor, the key thing besides horsepower, you're going to want to match the horsepower of your current. And the trick there is just go ahead and take a look at the label that you've got. This, of course, is my 2nd century motor, which not quite a fan of the useful life of it, but this is the pump we're using, or the motor we're using for now. All right, so we spec the horsepower. This is a 1.5 horsepower pump. But to that frame size, the key measure here is the 56Y. That's on mine. There's other measures there. So just make sure that when you source the part that you look at those key measures. The folks at Pools are great. You'll, of course, need to have the pump information off of the label before you call them, but they'll be able to set you up with all the parts you need. All right, last thing before we cut to starting to tear this thing open is the pump, when you remove it, is likely going to have water in it. So the first step, just to kind of keep your work area dry, is to take off your skimmer basket cover there, dump out any water, turn that pump over. There'll be some in the motor housing. Of course, as a pump, there will be water when we open it up. So I've got a plastic tarp on top of my, just a little crappy particle board workstation. But so I just put a little piece of plastic on to keep the water off of it. All right. Let's go ahead and get that taken care of. We'll move the parts out of the way, and then we'll start breaking this thing down. Okay, some of the joys of making videos around the house as a DIY guy is neighbors might be out at the pool partying, so enjoy the background music with Kool and the Gang. All right, so we've got the water dumped out, and the first step is we're going to go ahead, and as we said, we're going to reuse this. This is just a screw-off feature. So you're just going to go ahead and screw off this little conduit attachment. It should come right out of there, no problemo. All right, we'll put that aside. All right, next thing we're going to do, we're going to turn the motor on its side. You'll see I've got a little foot on this one. Yours could be different. It's just a squeeze that and just pull that right out. We'll go ahead and set that aside. All right. All right, meat and potatoes of this job is getting this motor off of this pump housing. So as we get into this, the first step is going to be breaking loose these 6 bolts. Now, I will tell you, as I said, this is the 2nd time I've replaced this motor, so I've already taken a run at these a couple years ago. But if yours has been there for a while, these things might be tough. And you will, the best thing is to have good tools for that. A good breaker bar, big wrenches. Actually on mine, when I did it, I had to slip a little pipe on top of my ratchet to give me some leverage. So this is going to be the challenge. It's also going to be a make and break point. So be aware of this before you start your job. If these strip in the process, they're so hard in there that you strip the nuts out, you're going to be dead in your tracks. Or worst case scenario, even worse scenario, is they break. That once you get that leverage on there, if you get too much leverage, it's just going to snap the bolt. And then you're just sunk. You're buying a new pump at that point. So just understand, going into this thing, this might not be a success. The elements have a crazy way of having an impact on whether these threads are going to break loose or not. So, again, it's the gamble. The worst case is you were going to buy a pump anyway. Probably why most places say just replace the whole pump, not the motor. But again, our goal here is to save you, $300 to $500 by doing this ourselves. So, all right, let's take a run at this. I think I'm going to be okay, but we'll take a shot. Okay, I went ahead and took those 6 bolts out that removed the pump housing and motor assembly. Reminded me that when I replaced this motor the first time, I actually went and bought all new hardware, new bolts, the 6 bolts here, as well as the 4 bolts from the motor to that little diffuser housing. The point there being is that, as I said, the elements will get to these things, and assuming that these things are going to fail over time, we'll do another replacement sometime in our future. It's a good thing to go ahead and get all new hardware when you can. It's a couple bucks more, but certainly worth the investment the next time you try to do this. All right, and in this case, I did buy stainless steel the first time. We don't want to get steel because those will rust and a higher likelihood that they will either seize on you or break altogether, and make it a more challenging repair next time. All right, now that we have this open, let's go ahead and take a closer look. We see the O-ring for the pump housing, and then we see the O-ring for the diffuser. Now, one thing I also learned the last time, if you touch this thing right here, you're gonna find it's gonna put a whole bunch of black stuff on you. So I'm actually not a fan of working in gloves, but I found putting gloves on while dealing with those O-rings just keeps your hands a little bit cleaner, less to have to worry about taking off after. So we'll go ahead and get this thing. The next step is for us to go ahead and get in here and take off these parts to get the impeller off in order to free the motor, because that impeller is currently attached to the shaft. So we got to go ahead and take all of this off here so we can remove the last 4 on the plate in order to separate the motor from the impeller. And that'll be these 4 bolts here. On this one, on my pump specifically, these are 9/16 inch hex heads. Okay, with the pump housing out of the way, we're going to now dive into getting to the impeller to take it off the shaft. And that next step is really easy. I'll actually go ahead and take away the O-rings. Got my silly Lectex gloves on. Just 2 screws here, and then we'll be staring at the impeller. All right, we've got the diffuser cover off, and now we're staring at the impeller. Here's our impeller right here. Now the way this comes off, we've got a 3/8 inch hex head there, and it looks like you use a regular head screwdriver. But what's key about this is that in order to keep the shaft stable, we're gonna have to go ahead and get a wrench on this. So it's 9/16 on this particular motor. So what we're gonna do, and if memory serves me, this is gonna be a lefty tighty or a righty loosey. So it's a reverse thread, and that's obviously because the way the motor spins, we wanna make sure we don't spin that nut out of the shaft. So everything you're used to doing as far as righty tighty, just flip it around, and we're gonna go righty loosey. All right, here goes. All right, got the bolt out. Wasn't too difficult. It's not torqued in there too tough. All right, now we need to take the impeller off, and the operation is very similar. We're going to use our 9/16 inch wrench to hold the shaft still on this side. And on this side, we're back to the righty-tighty, lefty-loosey. So we're going to go ahead and hold the shaft motor with the wrench on the back side, and then we'll lefty-loosey to spin the impeller off the shaft. Now, because I don't have a tripod and filming this myself, I went ahead and broke that off of there, and you can see it's just going to be a left-hand screw. Get this off of here, and there we go. And now our motor is clear. You can see now the shaft seal. We're going to go ahead and pull that off. We do have a new one, and we'll talk about the new one and how to install that once we get the old one off. Okay, we're almost home, but we are at a critical junction. This is going to be the make or break it moment. We've got to get these 4 out of here, and as long as we can get those off, we're in the clear. Again, some of these might be locked down pretty tight just because of corrosion and being outdoors, especially if you have a saltwater pool, anything like that. Now, I'm going to be using my impact driver to remove these. I'm fairly confident that they'll back out since I already have replaced this motor once. Probably best if this is the first time that this thing's been removed on your pump and it's been a couple years. I would prefer you to consider using a brake bar or a ratchet. These impact wrenches, if they start to torque too much, there's a higher chance that they'll snap the head off the bolt. So start out first with just a good box end wrench or open end wrench. Put a pipe on the end of it if you need a little bit of leverage, but not too long, because then you're going to over torque it and it'll just spin the head right off the bolt. But this is the critical point. If we find success here, we're going to be in the home stretch. All right, easy peasy Japanesey. As you can see, they came right out, but you can see, look on these threads. Again, these were brand new the last time I bought this thing, or last time I replaced it, excuse me. And you can see they've got that corrosion on there. So that's what you're dealing with. And these have only been in this housing for about 2.5 years. As I said, I was a little disappointed in the lifespan of the motor. We'll talk a little bit more about that at the end, but right now, probably gonna go ahead and get these replaced with some brand new ones. Make sure we've got fresh hardware in there. So if I have to service thing again, which chances are I will, this should be less of a problem for me, and they'll spin right out like they did today. Okay, I've got the motor up on its end, and all we're gonna do is just pop this off. I already kind of pre-broke this, just a couple pops from here, and you'll see that come right off of there. Comes with that shaft seal in here, which we'll be doing in one of our next couple steps here. And there we go. There's the old motor. the bad motor, and next steps we'll be looking at getting the new one and reversing everything you just saw. Okay, money saver. So as I told you, we saw this corrosion here, but upon further inspection you can see that the actual part that goes into the housing is only that last 1/4 inch, and you can see it's actually pretty pristine. So I said, you know what, why don't we save a couple bucks? These were stainless. I made the investment in the stainless the last time I rebuilt this. And they should clean up, so I just put them in the vise, you know, put the head in the vise, hit the wire brush on it, and it's good as new. So no need to run, get new hardware for this. I'm gonna run with this. Maybe that bites me in the ass in a couple of years, but I think I'm gonna be good. So I'm gonna go ahead and move on. Next step is gonna be removing the old shaft seal. And what we're gonna do here, we're just gonna get a socket that fits right in there nice and snug, and just give it a couple taps from the backside and pop it out. It is the old one, so if it breaks, not a big deal. That's a ceramic piece, so it might be brittle. But the goal, of course, is to get it out in one piece, and just so this way we can move on to starting to rebuild everything. All right, our next step is to pull the shaft seal out of the housing here. Really easy to do. Just gonna take a socket, set it in there. Just found one that fits. And it's a quick tap. Boom, it's out. All right, now here's what's key. Let's look and see. It's sitting this way. This is how we want it to go up and into it, as opposed to this side. So we want most of the big ceramic piece is gonna face in towards the impeller. This part is gonna face out. Actually, out towards the impeller, excuse me. So this is what we're gonna put back in here. Okay, we're in the home stretch of our disassembly. Last thing we need to do is remove the shaft seal from the housing here. This is the side that faces in towards the motor, because you can see there are my 4 motor mounts. So this is the part where the motor is up this way. The other side faces the impeller side. That's what's going to be over there. And what we want to pay attention to is, you notice in here we got, you can see mostly ceramic and a little bit of rubber. Let's go ahead and pop this out. Real simple, super simple. Put a socket in there. This happens to be 16 millimeter. A little quick wrap, pops that out of there. Go ahead and lift that off, and you can see how we see more rubber now, less ceramic. So more rubber, less ceramic facing out towards the motor. More ceramic, less rubber facing in towards the impeller. All right, let's get busy putting this thing back together. All right, got the new device here. You can see I got my latex gloves again. Again, the pros are saying do not touch that with your skin, get the skin oils on it. So I'm just gonna pop that son of a gun in there, and hopefully just see if I can just press it in there. Yeah, it looks like it went in there, no problem. All right, so that's in there. All right, now it's time to do everything we just did in reverse. So what we're gonna do, we're gonna get that motor, we're gonna push that through here, put the bolts back in it, and then we'll start rebuilding everything. Yeah, look what I discovered. So pro tip, take your parts out before you start working on your project. Obviously, I'm in the middle of this project, and I just discovered that this is busted off here. You can see it bent and busted here. Now, let me tell you, this is why I like going back to Inyo Pools, or why I use Inyo Pools as my resource for materials. Called them up. Michelle couldn't have been more friendly, said she'd take care of this. Now, unfortunately, due to shipping and this being a Friday before Memorial Day, I won't see a new motor until sometime next week. But I'm going to go ahead and move forward with this. I've got the old cover that I can pop back on here, but there's also one other stud that was busted off of here. So because I know how to do this, and this really from soup to nuts without filming video will take me 20 minutes to pull the old one out and put a new one in, I'm just going to do another replacement. So but for today, we're going to go ahead and continue on with this, and I'll use the cover off my existing motor to take care of this guy here. All right, so I've got the motor seated in the housing here. Now, one thing to keep track of and really observe before you start, I kind of knew where this was, but you can actually rotate that motor in all 4 positions, clockwise or counterclockwise. But what you don't want to do is end up with the capacitor on the bottom, because then we're going to have to do this whole thing all over again. So it can be on the side, but again, the right thing to do is to have your power come in on the side, as we saw when we removed it, with the capacitor on the top. So make sure you pay attention to that. I've got my refurbished stainless steel bolts, getting ready to just drive those back in. Again, I will use the impact wrench, not required. And really, once they tighten, I'm going to leave it at that. It doesn't have to be, hugely tightened. Next step is to put in the second half of the shaft seal. That just presses on there. I'm going to need 2 hands for that. We'll do that. Then we'll go ahead, screw the impeller back in, and put that left threaded bolt back in the end of the shaft there. Okay, got the impeller back on there. I put that left threaded bolt in there. Probably best bet here is don't over torque this. Just by the nature of how it spins in the direction of those left-handed threads, it's not going to back out. Just snug it up and move on. No need to over tighten that. All right, so now we go ahead and put the diffuser cover. Now, one tip to look at here is, I don't know if you can see it here, there's a little arrow there. You want to line that up and make sure you're in the right spot. That should set this up for our Phillips head screws here. Now, in putting these in, highly recommend do not use an impact driver for this, or a drill screw gun, etc. Just go ahead and use a good old-fashioned Phillips head screw and get those snugged up. Okay, with the diffuser cover on, the next step is to prepare the O-ring seals. Now, an O-ring is only as good as the surface that it's seated on, and if there's just one little grain or speck of sand in there, it's going to cause a leak. So, highly recommend that you take I've got a shop towel here, a rag. Go ahead and clean that up and get any of that dirt and debris off of there, so we got a nice clean surface for it to sit on. All right, from here I'm going to go ahead and get the stupid latex gloves on so I don't get black all over me as I lube those up, so stay tuned. All right, our next step, we're going to lube our O-rings here. So just take like a little pea size. Usually what I do is I put it between my 2 fingers and then rub it around. Of course, I got the latex gloves on, so it doesn't matter how messy we get, but we'll just want to make sure we get good even coverage around that, and we don't let it touch any surfaces. Again, we don't want to pick up a bit of sand or something to get in there. So once I lube it up, I'll go ahead and put it right there on the diffuser. Now, I don't know if you caught that in that last clip, but like a dumbass, I sat there and told you, we don't want any bits of sand on it. Make sure you wipe down the surface. But in the the video, I had the gasket sitting on this, filthy table. It's covered with stuff. So I wiped all that down first, made sure there was no dirt on there, and lubed these up real nice. And it's my uneducated opinion that sealer is not really about keeping the gasket moist. To me, it seems like the effect there is to fill in any, sort of, whether it's a, minute defect in the gasket, or maybe you did get a little piece of something in there. It seems to me that it works more as a secondary barrier. But in either case, regardless, always lube your gaskets, cover them really good. Use the gloves so you don't get your hands dirty. See, mine are nice and clean. And now we'll go ahead and get the outer housing with the 6 bolts on this thing and get going. All right, I was getting ready to put the housing on, and notice that there's a little bit of, you can see some dirt down in here. So gonna take the shop towel again, wipe this whole thing out, get that all nice and clean, so that when we close this thing up, we got a nice tight seal and no leaks around the housing. Okay, I've got the 6 bolts in to bolt the housing to the motor assembly. Pro tip here, don't work in a counterclockwise fashion when tightening these. Obviously, you get them first thumb started. But I did use my impact driver. Probably best not to, but hey, that's what I do. But what you do is go ahead and hit one over here, and then you're going to move and do the one diagonal from it, and then come up and cross. So this way we don't get it pushed in one direction and then pinch it onto there. We want to try to get it evenly pressed in. So always good, whether in this project or any other project, always good to work across from the nuts so that you get a nice straight flush push in rather than an angled push in. All right, 2 quick steps until we're done. We're going to get our little foot here, and we're going to push that right up inside of here. That allows that motor to stand up. All right, and lastly, we're going to go ahead and put in there, we're going to pop this bad guy out here. I'm going to have to unscrew that, get the screwdriver, unscrew that. And where's our fitting? And we'll get this bolted, screwed right into there. All right, there like that. Okay, that rebuild was complete. We will still continue on through the reinstall because I got one more pro tip I want to share with you. But all in all, that's done. Now, I did a couple breaks here and there for video, but generally speaking, the last time I flipped one of these, maybe 20-30 minutes to do end to end. It could take upwards of 2 hours, depending if you have a challenge breaking those bolts off. I'll tell you this, The first time I did it, it certainly took me more than 20 minutes, but now that I've got this now being my fourth one of these, 20 minutes end to end, very reasonable job, not too challenging, but challenging enough. So we'll continue on and then wrap it up. All right, I seated the pump out on the floor, went ahead and greased up, lubed up my O-rings for those flanges, got those back in there, and used my large channel locks to tighten those guys up. So we're all set from a plumbing perspective. Last step in the process is to get our electrical hooked back up. We're going to go ahead and get our wire through this little conduit piece here and then get it tied down on our lugs. All right, like we talked about before, one of the things I do is I keep the loops in the wire beforehand and just put the screw in directly there. That way I don't have to bend it around there, bend it out, bend it in. Most important part about hooking this back up is making sure this loop, it's nice and tight against the shaft of that screw. We don't want that thing sticking out where it might pop off. Get it up underneath there. Again, use your needle nose pliers if you need to bend it around the shaft. Okay, got the wiring screwed down on the lugs. We're gonna go ahead and pull our little nut up here, get this tightened up. Now, last thing before we close this up, and very, very important, is to hook our bonding wire back up. I tell you what, the first time I did this, I had forgotten about that. I found it the next day, so no harm, no foul, but very important to make sure we have this bonding wire secured down. So we'll go ahead and secure that. We'll get the top on there, and then we'll get this baby fired up. All right, we have the pump hooked up. Everything's plumbed. The electrical's sealed up tight. Got the bonding wire on there nice and tight. My last little pro tip, if you notice, if you recall, when we pulled this out, we had to dump all that water out that was down in the bottom of this pump. Well, the way this pump is going to work is in order for it to get started to pull the water, it's got to be primed. So a little tip there is to just get a little 5-gallon bucket, halfway filled up, and pour it in there, get that pump filled up so that when we kick it on, it's actually going to allow the vacuum effect to occur and start pulling the water in from the pool. All right, so I'm going to prime it up and get it turned on. All right, we've got it turned on. As you can see, the water's beginning to flow. It'll take a little bit to work the air out of the line until it fills this up, but we're all set there. It's pumping, it's working. As a little tip, when I filled it up to prime it, I overflowed it and got a little bit of water there. Would have been nice for it to stay dry so that I could see if I had any leaks in any of my connections, but no worries, we'll go ahead and keep an eye on it, and if we see any leaks, we'll address those as necessary. There you go, we're all full. Looks like a successful pool pump motor replacement. Okay, job's done. Out back with the cigar, you can see the waterfall's on, pump is running. All in all, generally, it's for me, it's a fun project when it goes well. When you trust me, on that first one, when you take that one apart, those bolts the first time, they can give you a heck of a time. I remember getting a little bit frustrated. Probably took me 40 minutes alone just to get those 6 bolts off. So don't be discouraged. But again, before you go into this, understand that the real risk is around those bolts. And if you can get them out, you should be home free. Of course, there's any number of things that can pop up. But generally, for me, I found that to be the critical point, is getting those bolts out successfully. So if you can do that, great project. I saved myself probably between $300 and $500. Had I had a professional, that's if I bought a whole new pump. Had I had a professional come out, probably would have been savings of about $800 to $1,000, let's say, with the pump. So regarding the lifespan of the motor, as you heard, it had been about 2 years. It's really 2 years, 4 months on that motor. Should have, at the very minimum, I expected a 3 to 5 year useful life. So a bit disappointed. This isn't an Inyo thing, it's actually a Century motor. I'd wish Inyo might be able to spec something that's got a better life expectancy. That said, I know there's elements, these are pools. My motor's on the hot side of the house, the sunset side of the house. It's shielded, but it gave me an idea about a new project. So come back, next video, we'll talk about building a shield to see if we can't get a better useful life out of this. If I can stretch it to 4 years with maybe $30 worth of stuff I have laying around, then that'd be fantastic. All right, hope you enjoyed it. Leave any comments below, but I'm not a big comments guy, so have fun with it. All right, guys.